Who raised you more, your parents, your grandparents, or someone else?
Picture this moment that still sends a shiver down my spine even now, 5 years after my family branded me an utter disgrace for walking away from college. When I stepped into my little sister Lisa's graduation ceremony at her prestigious university, looking more polished and self-assured than I ever had during those chaotic dropout days, the auditorium humming with the excited chatter of proud parents and fresh-faced graduates who had no idea that the woman slipping quietly into the back row carried a secret heavy enough to silence the entire room in one fell swoop. As Lisa took the stage under the bright lights, her smile radiant and her achievements celebrated by everyone around her, her professor glanced my way during the applause and asked with genuine curiosity into the microphone, "You know her?" Locking eyes with the crowd that included deans and donors, all hanging on the edge of their seats, and I stood up slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle before replying with a calm voice that cut through the air like a well-honed blade. "Oh yes, I funded her entire department." Watching as the place dropped into a stunned hush where you could have heard a pin drop amid the sea of shocked expressions and whispered questions that rippled outward like waves from a stone thrown into still water. But that triumphant silence was just the explosive conclusion to a long, grueling journey that started back when I was 20 years old, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of student loans and endless late-night study sessions at State University in Ohio, where my parents Tom and Karen Harper had instilled in me from childhood the unshakable belief that a college degree was the only reliable path out of our modest Midwestern suburb life, with Dad grinding away at his factory job that scarcely covered the mortgage and Mom balancing exhausting nursing shifts that left her drained, but determined to see both her daughters succeed in ways she never could. Lisa, being 3 years younger than me, had always been the shining star in their eyes, effortlessly excelling in school and winning over teachers with her natural charm while I plugged along with solid, but unremarkable grades in my business program, harboring vague dreams of something more creative and hands-on that the rigid curriculum seemed to smother day by day. The pressure mounting like an unrelenting storm until one dreary afternoon in the crowded campus cafe after I had completely tanked a midterm exam. Due to sheer exhaustion from pulling all-nighters just to keep up, I finally reached my breaking point and decided to drop out right then and there, convincing myself in that impulsive haze that I could navigate real-world opportunities through community college or even a trade apprenticeship later on, drawing inspiration from those inspiring tales of successful dropouts who had bootstrapped their way to fortune without the burden of formal credentials weighing them down. What I imagined as a courageous leap toward independence turned out to be a harsh awakening that unfolded brutally as I trudged back to our family home that same evening, rehearsing my explanation over and over in my mind while picturing at least a modicum of support or empathy from the people who had sacrificed so much to get me there, only to face Dad's face contorting into a mask of fury the instant I laid out my decision in the warm glow of the kitchen light, his voice thundering through the space within. Intensity he rarely unleashed as he declared, "You're a disgrace, Emily, an absolute disgrace to everything this family stands for," the words landing like punches that echoed off the walls while Mom stood frozen nearby, her eyes filling with tears as though I had personally shattered her lifelong aspirations, softly lamenting how I had squandered all their hard-earned support in one foolish choice. Lisa, who had been lingering on the staircase pretending to scroll through her phone, watched the scene with a conflicted expression that mixed fleeting sympathy for me with an undercurrent of relief that the spotlight of disappointment had shifted away from her own path, and by the end of that devastating night, they collectively decided to sever all ties of financial assistance, leaving me with nothing but a hastily packed duffel bag, the keys to the old family car that they reclaimed immediately, and a one-way bus ticket out of town that felt more like an exile than a fresh start. Crashing on a distant friend's lumpy couch in the bustling heart of Cleveland, I scraped together survival through sporadic barista shifts at a dingy coffee shop where the pay was laughably low and the pervasive aroma of over-roasted beans clung to my clothes like a badge of defeat for weeks on end. The deep humiliation of it all burning fiercer than the constant hunger pangs from a perpetually empty pantry stocked only with instant noodles and whatever scraps I could afford. Old acquaintances from school began to fade into the background, some ghosting me entirely while others spread whispers through mutual circles that painted me as lazy or hopelessly misguided. And the holiday cards that trickled in from home carried subtle barbs that twisted deeper with each passing season, such as Lisa's cheerful annual newsletters boasting about her mounting scholarships and vibrant campus life, while conveniently omitting any mention of my existence, as if I had evaporated from the family narrative altogether. Those long, lonely nights dissolved into a monotonous fog of fruitless job applications and meager meals heated on a hot plate, my cell phone remaining stubbornly quiet except for the relentless harassment from debt collectors who spoke to me with the cold disdain reserved for deadbeats, forcing me to confront the nagging doubts swirling in my head about whether my so-called bold decision had been nothing more than naive recklessness that anyone watching from the outside, especially those midlife strivers reflecting on their own paths of compromise and perseverance, would view as a reckless abandonment of stability for an illusory promise of freedom. Yet beneath that wave of self-doubt, a stubborn resilience took root that propelled me forward despite the odds, leading me to immerse myself in free online tutorials about computer programming after one particularly chatty regular at the coffee shop raved endlessly about how tech skills were revolutionizing job markets and opening doors that traditional education could never touch, turning what began as a desperate grasp at relevance into a structured routine of hunched-over sessions on a borrowed laptop in underlit public libraries where the hum of fluorescent lights matched the buzz of possibilities starting to form. It was during one such exhaustive evening of scrolling through classified ads on a glitchy connection that I stumbled upon an entry-level data entry position at a modest software company right in the downtown area, mustering the courage to apply despite the glaring gaps in my resume that screamed dropout status, and much to my surprise, the hiring manager named Rick, a pragmatic veteran of the industry with a no-frills demeanor, scrutinized my application with a skeptical eye but ultimately offered me the job after I passionately described my self-taught initiative as the kind of raw determination that polished resumes often lacked, providing a modest salary that at least covered rent alongside an unexpected gateway into the dynamic world of technology that I had only vaguely understood from afar. As I settled into that first day on the job, tentatively navigating spreadsheets that concealed the foundations of more complex coding algorithms beneath their surface simplicity, a faint but insistent spark of hope flickered to life within me, suggesting that this unassuming opportunity might just unravel into the lifeline I needed to reconstruct my shattered trajectory, though I could never have anticipated how that initial thread would weave through unforeseen entanglements with my estranged family, pulling them inexorably back into my rising orbit with consequences that would test every ounce of the resolve I had painstakingly built. Those initial months grinding away at the software firm unfolded like a never-ending tug-of-war with an opponent who always seemed one step ahead, where every day blurred into the next amid monotonous data entry tasks that dulled my senses faster than a bad habit, all while I navigated an office environment teeming with ambitious young graduates straight out of top-tier schools who regarded me with a mix of patronizing curiosity and thinly veiled superiority, treating the dropout in their midst as little more than a quirky anecdote to share over after-work drinks rather than a colleague deserving of real respect. Rick, my no-nonsense manager with his salt and pepper hair and perpetual coffee mug in hand, proved to be a quiet ally in the chaos, occasionally slipping me more substantive assignments like troubleshooting basic scripts when the higher-ups weren't paying attention, which ignited brief bursts of excitement amid the drudgery and reminded me why I had clawed my way into this field despite the overwhelming odds stacked against someone without the golden stamp of a diploma. Outside those walls, my life remained a precarious balancing act on the edge of financial ruin, confined to a cramped studio apartment in Cleveland's less glamorous neighborhoods where the faint musty odor of previous tenants mingled with the stale scent of microwave dinners, and I devoted every scrap of free time to self-educating through a patchwork of online resources, poring over Python tutorials on a second-hand laptop that wheezed like an old smoker whenever I pushed it too hard. transforming what could have been aimless scrolling into a disciplined regimen that built my skills layer by layer even as exhaustion tugged at the corners of my vision. A touch of wry humor emerged in the midst of those grueling stretches, such as the unforgettable afternoon when I fumbled a live demo during a team meeting and accidentally drenched the department head's keyboard in a cascade of spilled latte, earning me the enduring moniker of Brewmaster Emily that circulated through the break room with chuckles from even the snobbiest interns, lightening the atmosphere just enough to keep me from crumbling under the weight of constant scrutiny, while underscoring the absurd ironies of my uphill battle. Yet for all the small victories in code that started to click into place, the sting of isolation deepened with each passing milestone my family ignored, particularly as the holiday season descended upon the city with its twinkling lights and festive ads that only amplified my solitude, forcing me to confront Lisa's increasingly polished social media feeds where she chronicled her stellar freshman year at the university with tales of academic triumphs and social escapades that painted a picture of effortless ascent, her posts laced with an unspoken subtext that positioned her as the family's redemption while I lingered in the shadows like a forgotten footnote. To supplement the meager paycheck from the firm that barely covered rent and utilities, I took on weekend gigs as a rideshare driver weaving through the congested streets, chauffeuring a parade of loquacious passengers from all walks of life who often mistook my silence for an invitation to dispense life advice drawn from their own hard-won experiences, with one silver-haired executive in particular lecturing me endlessly about the perils of foregoing a degree in an economy that rewarded paper credentials above all else, his words hitting too close to home and stirring a bubbling frustration that I masked with polite nods while gripping the wheel a little tighter. Amid those rides, an unexpected connection sparked during a sluggish evening commute when a passenger named Maria, a seasoned entrepreneur with a quick laugh and an eye for untapped potential, caught snippets of my frustrated mutterings about half-formed ideas for simple apps that could streamline everyday business headaches. And rather than dismissing them as idle chatter, she handed me her business card with a conspiratorial wink, commenting on how my raw dropout narrative carried a authenticity she rarely encountered in the polished pitches of venture-backed startups, which opened the door to my first tentative forays into freelance work where I crafted rudimentary automation tools for neighborhood shops struggling to stay afloat in the digital age. That side income gradually eased the pressure enough for me to ditch the lingering barista shifts that had haunted my resume, allowing a sliver of breathing room in my schedule. But not without complications arising from an old acquaintance named Jake who resurfaced out of the blue via a seemingly innocuous message feigning interest in catching up after years apart, only to reveal his true intentions by subtly probing for free assistance on coding problems tied to his fledgling side project, a betrayal that crystallized when I later discovered through mutual friends that he had been the source of vicious rumors circulating back in our hometown circles, portraying my life choices as a spectacular flameout destined for failure. Swallowing the bitter taste of that deception, I responded with a curt email that concealed my inner turmoil behind professional courtesy, channeling the raw anger into accelerated progress on my own endeavors rather than letting it derail the momentum I had fought so hard to gain, all while a quiet undercurrent of vengeful plotting began to simmer in the recesses of my mind, envisioning ways to turn personal slights into professional triumphs that would one day force even the most dismissive voices to reconsider their judgments. By the close of my second year in this relentless grind, I had scraped together sufficient savings to purchase a reliable laptop of my own that no longer overheated during intensive sessions, empowering me to flesh out the core concept for what would become my flagship venture, an accessible AI platform designed specifically for small-scale enterprises such as family-run diners and boutique retailers to forecast inventory needs without the prohibitive costs associated with enterprise-level software, a notion born directly from the inefficiencies I had witnessed firsthand during my coffee shop days where perishable goods rotted away due to poor planning, positioning the tool as a subtle counterpunch against the corporate behemoths that preyed on the vulnerable underdogs much in the same way my family had cast me aside to preserve their image of success. Infused with that personal stake, the project took on a life of its own as I refined prototypes in stolen hours, balancing the thrill of creation against the ever-present specter of doubt that whispered about the foolhardiness of betting everything on an unproven idea without the safety net of credentials. A risk that those watching from afar might decry as reckless stubbornness, even as it fueled my drive forward. Nervous energy coursed through me as I mustered the resolve to present this vision at a local investor networking event crammed with sharp-suited professionals who exuded confidence born of privilege. My voice holding steady through the initial wave of skeptical glances and muttered asides about yet another wide-eyed dreamer lacking formal backing, yet one attendee in particular, a venture capitalist named Alex, with a piercing gaze and a reputation for spotting diamonds in the rough, approached me afterward with measured intrigue, extending a challenging handshake as he said, "You've got the spark, Emily, but talk is cheap. Deliver a working prototype within the next month, or this conversation ends here," leaving me to step out into the drizzling night air with my pulse thundering in my ears. Torn between exhilaration at the possibility of a breakthrough and the gnawing fear that this pivotal opportunity could unearth long-buried family secrets capable of upending everything I had so painstakingly constructed. Delivering on Alex's daunting challenge transformed my already chaotic existence into an unrelenting marathon fueled by black coffee and sheer willpower, where nights stretched into dawn as I hammered away at the prototype for what would become Harper AI, debugging lines of code that seemed to mock me with every error message popping up on my screen like uninvited guests at a party I couldn't afford to host, all while juggling the full-time demands at the software firm that left me bleary-eyed and questioning if this double life was sustainable or just a recipe for total burnout in the unforgiving tech landscape where only the relentless survived. The prototype itself evolved from a bare-bones script into a functional demo that showcased how small businesses could input basic sales data to receive tailored inventory predictions, a feature I fine-tuned with real-world anecdotes from my rideshare days to make it resonate with owners facing the same cash flow nightmares I had endured. And when I finally presented it to Alex in his sleek downtown office overlooking the river, his initial skepticism melted into cautious enthusiasm as he leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin before announcing a seed investment of $20,000 that hit me like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, enabling me to quit the firm and dedicate myself fully to turning this idea into a viable company amid the thrill of possibility tempered by the ever-present dread of failure lurking just beyond the horizon. With that funding secured, Harper AI officially launched from the confines of my modest apartment turned makeshift headquarters, targeting those overlooked mom-and-pop operations across the Midwest with affordable tools that promise to cut waste and boost efficiency without the steep learning curve of bloated corporate software. And almost immediately, positive buzz began to circulate through word-of-mouth referrals from early adopters who shared heartfelt testimonials about dodging bankruptcy thanks to our predictions, stories that reaffirmed my conviction that this venture was more than a business. It was a quiet rebellion against the systems that had marginalized people like me for lacking the right pedigree. A dash of humor punctuated those early triumphs, such as the memorable incident with my inaugural major client, a boisterous bakery owner named Sal who tested the platform with unbridled enthusiasm only to inadvertently trigger an order for 500 pounds of flour based on a whimsical input, resulting in a flour explosion of a video conference call where we both ended up laughing hysterically amid the powdery chaos on his end, his good-natured ribbing about my magic machine gone haywire, forging a bond that led to glowing reviews and additional introductions in his network, while in quieter moments of frustration during late-night revisions, I'd grumble to myself about the sheer heck of untangling algorithmic knots that felt as tangled as family holiday dinners gone wrong, a light vulgarity in my private mutterings that kept the isolation at bay without crossing into outright bitterness. Yet as the company's revenue began to climb steadily, casting a warmer glow on my financial outlook and allowing for small luxuries like actual groceries instead of perpetual ramen, the encroaching shadows of my family history refused to dissipate entirely. manifesting most acutely through Lisa's omnipresent social media chronicle of her burgeoning success in the university's business program, where she not only racked up accolades, but also secured a prestigious internship that screamed of insider advantages. Her curated posts subtly underscoring a narrative of familial pride centered solely on her ascent, while I remained the invisible cautionary tale whispered in the background. The twist that truly unsettled me came during a casual conversation with one of my expanding client base, a local retailer who casually mentioned encountering Lisa at a networking event and hearing her recount our shared family backstory in a way that positioned my dropout as the pivotal lesson in perseverance. A revelation that prompted me to probe deeper and uncover through discreet online digging that she had leveraged that very narrative to bolster her own application, potentially amplifying the severity of my parents' cutoff in subtle ways that suggested jealousy or strategic maneuvering on her part to eliminate any competition for the spotlight, leaving me to grapple with a surge of conflicted emotions where resentment warred with the lingering ache of sibling bonds frayed beyond easy repair. That internal turmoil only intensified as external pressures mounted with the company's growth, particularly when a rival firm approached me with an aggressive buyout offer laced with insidious conditions that involved siphoning anonymized data from my smaller clients to fuel their proprietary models. A proposition that dangled the allure of rapid scaling and financial security, but clashed violently with the ethical foundation I had built from my own experiences of being exploited and discarded, forcing me to weigh the temptation of shortcuts against the risk of compromising the trust that had become Harper AI's bedrock in an industry rife with cutthroat tactics that preyed on the vulnerable. Hiring my first full-time employee, a sharp-minded fellow dropout named Theo, whose infectious optimism and sales savvy complemented my technical focus, brought fresh energy to the operation as we expanded the platform's capabilities to include trend forecasting for retail sectors, pushing our annual revenue past the $1 million threshold in a surge that validated every sleepless night. But the shady deal lingered like a bad aftertaste, with Theo advocating for cautious rejection while I wrestled privately with the dilemma, knowing that turning it down could invite retaliation from a competitor powerful enough to undermine our fragile momentum. A choice that those observing from the vantage of midlife stability might view as admirably principled yet perilously naive in the dog-eat-dog world of startups, where survival often demanded moral flexibility. Just as we toasted that milestone contract in a modest celebration at a corner bar, an anonymous email materialized in my inbox with cryptic precision, its subject line reading "an opportunity for true impact," and body alluding to the university's business department teetering on the brink of funding shortfalls that threatened program cuts, suggesting in veiled terms that a strategic donation from an emerging tech leader could not only salvage the initiative, but also rewrite certain personal histories, the message carrying an undercurrent of familiarity that hinted at orchestration by someone close to Lisa or even a family intermediary sniffing out my rising profile, igniting a spark of calculated revenge that promised to entwine my success with their world in ways both exhilarating and dangerously unpredictable. Securing that landmark contract propelled Harper AI into a phase of accelerated expansion that reshaped my daily reality, from solitary coding marathons in a dim apartment to orchestrating a bustling operation with leased offices overlooking Cleveland's revitalized waterfront, where a team of 10 dedicated professionals collaborated on enhancements that transformed our platform into an indispensable asset for small businesses navigating economic turbulence, allowing me to step into the role of CEO with a confidence forged through years of proving doubters wrong while still grappling with the imposter syndrome that whispered reminders of my unconventional path in boardrooms filled with Ivy League pedigrees. Those high-stakes meetings evolved into strategic chess matches where I anticipated moves from investors and partners with a clarity born of hard knocks, turning potential pitfalls into opportunities for innovation that kept our growth trajectory steep. And amid the whirlwind of success, moments of levity provided essential relief, like the time Theo, ever the wild card in our group, derailed a formal investor pitch with an unintended slide deck riddled with cat memes intended as icebreakers. which instead elicited belly laughs from a typically stoic venture capitalist who confessed afterward that the unpretentious humor was exactly what convinced him to double his commitment, highlighting how injecting personality into the corporate grind could disarm even the most jaded skeptics in an industry often starved for genuine connection. Despite these uplifting strides, the undercurrents of personal uncertainty persisted like fog rolling off the lake, intensified by solitary holidays spent with delivery takeout and a laptop for company, while Lisa's online saga depicted idyllic family gatherings brimming with warmth and achievement that deliberately excluded any trace of my existence. A deliberate erasure that fueled a quiet resentment intertwined with the poignant realization that true accomplishment sometimes amplified the voids left by fractured relationships in ways that money alone could never fill. Delving deeper into the anonymous email's implications uncovered layers of family entanglement that added a sharper edge to my budding revenge plot, revealing through targeted research that Dad's long-standing factory position had cultivated informal ties to university donors over the years. Connections that Lisa appeared to have quietly exploited by minimizing mentions of my dropout in her networking pitches to avoid any perceived blemish on the Harper name, a subtle manipulation that suggested her ascent was not solely merit-based, but propped up by selective storytelling which now positioned the underfunded business department as a vulnerable target for my intervention. The irony of funneling resources into the very institution that symbolized my early defeat carrying a poetic justice that both thrilled and unsettled me as I weighed the moral ambiguities of such a calculated gesture. A particularly jolting twist emerged during my routine competitive analysis when I traced funding trails back to a rival startup aggressively undercutting our prices, only to discover it was covertly backed by none other than Uncle Ray, the family friend who had publicly labeled me a disgrace during a tense reunion barbecue shortly after my exit from college. His involvement now manifesting as targeted marketing campaigns that poached a handful of our clients through promises of cheaper alternatives laced with data-sharing clauses that echoed the shady buyout I had rejected months prior, prompting me to arrange a discreet coffee rendezvous where his smug demeanor across the table confirmed the personal vendetta as he sipped his espresso and quipped, "Luck's a fickle thing, Emily, don't let it go to your head." A confrontation that steeled my resolve without descending into outright hostility, but left me pondering the ethical tightrope of responding in kind, tempted by aggressive countermeasures that the audience in my mind might applaud as savvy retribution yet struck me as a slippery slope toward the very ruthlessness my family had accused me of embodying all those years ago. That internal conflict over boundaries in business mirrored the larger dilemma of channeling success into personal reckoning. As I pored over university financial reports showing the business department's desperate scramble for endowments amid statewide budget slashes that threatened to gut programs vital to future entrepreneurs, much like the public institutions that had shaped so many midlife careers now hanging by a thread in an era of fiscal austerity, and with Harper AI's valuation soaring toward 8 figures from lucrative expansions into predictive analytics for service industries, the prospect of anonymous philanthropy crystallized into a multifaceted strategy where initial donations via a discrete foundation would earmark funds for scholarships aiding non-traditional students and state-of-the-art labs to foster hands-on innovation. Moves that not only bolstered the department's survival, but also sowed seeds of narrative disruption by positioning an unseen tech innovator as its savior, a role I orchestrated with meticulous care to maintain the veil of mystery until the optimal moment for revelation. Light vulgarity colored my private reflections during strategy huddles with Theo, where we'd jest about the sheer audacity of rubbing elbows with the ghosts who haunted us through this financial sleight of hand, keeping the tension from boiling over into outright cynicism while acknowledging the heck of balancing altruism with the sharp satisfaction of impending payback. Though doubts lingered about whether this path represented genuine empowerment or merely a sophisticated form of score settling that could alienate potential allies in the long run. The plot thickened when an unexpected graduation invitation for Lisa arrived in the mail, its formal engraving carrying an impersonal tone that belied any warmth yet pulled me inexorably toward confrontation by including a VIP designation likely tied to the emerging donor buzz, and on the cusp of the ceremony, a rare phone call from Mom pierced the silence after years of estrangement, her voice trembling with uncharacteristic vulnerability as she alluded to preserving family pride amid hints of Dad's health woes and Lisa's mounting pressures. A plea that blurred the lines between manipulation and sincere outreach, forcing me to hang up with unresolved questions churning inside as I laid out my tailored suit for the event, the air thick with anticipation of the witty disclosure I had rehearsed in my mind, wondering if striding into that auditorium would bridge the chasm of betrayal or merely widen it into an abyss from which no easy reconciliation could emerge. Graduation day broke over the university campus, with a deceptive clarity of blue skies and gentle breezes rustling through the oak-lined paths, transforming the sprawling grounds into a vibrant tableau of eager families milling about in their Sunday best, while clusters of graduates in flowing black gowns exchanged nervous hugs and last-minute photos under the watchful eyes of faculty members who moved with the practiced poise of those accustomed to such ceremonial pageantry, yet beneath the festive veneer, my own pulse raced with a potent cocktail of apprehension and barely contained exhilaration as I navigated the throngs toward the auditorium entrance. Dressed in a sleek charcoal suit that projected the quiet authority of someone who had earned her place through unyielding determination rather than inherited privilege, slipping into the venue early to claim a seat in the shadowed rear where I could observe the unfolding spectacle without drawing premature attention amid the sea of beaming parents clutching programs and smartphones poised for capturing every milestone. The air inside hummed with anticipation laced by the faint scent of fresh flowers from the stage arrangements and polished wood from the tiered seating that creaked softly under the weight of arriving guests. And as the ceremony commenced with swelling orchestral strains and processional marches, I watched Lisa ascend to the platform with the poise of a natural performer, her valedictorian address weaving eloquent threads about the transformative power of innovation and resilience in an ever-shifting world that mirrored fragments of my own suppressed ambitions in ways that stirred a complex brew of pride for her accomplishments and resentment for the opportunities she had navigated with family backing I had been denied. The audience of midlife attendees leaning forward in rapt agreement, their nods reflecting personal echoes of careers built on similar foundations now facing the uncertainties of later chapters in life. Whispers began to circulate midway through the proceedings as the dean took the podium to acknowledge recent endowments that had rescued the business department from impending cuts, praising the anonymous benefactor's foresight in allocating resources toward scholarships for diverse applicants and cutting-edge labs designed to bridge theory with practical entrepreneurship, a narrative that positioned the mystery donor as a beacon of progressive philanthropy in an era where public education teetered on the brink of further erosion, and though no name surfaced, the subtle clues I had planted through layered foundations ensured the impact rippled visibly in upgraded facilities and expanded programs that would outlast the day's fanfare. The pivotal moment crystallized when Lisa, scanning the crowd during her closing thanks to mentors and supporters, locked eyes with me across the distance, her expression shifting from triumphant glow to frozen surprise that betrayed a flicker of recognition laced with unease, prompting the professor seated beside her on stage to lean into the microphone with affable curiosity and inquire of the assembly. "Does anyone know that woman in the back? She seems familiar," his words amplifying through the speakers to envelop the room in a hush of collective intrigue where heads turned and murmurs built like a gathering storm, drawing every gaze toward my position as I rose deliberately from my seat, allowing the full weight of the accumulated years to infuse my posture before responding in a voice steady and resonant enough to carry without strain. "Yes, I know her quite well. In fact, I am the one who funded her entire department. From the scholarships that brought students like her through the doors to the labs equipping the next generation with tools for real-world success, the declaration landing with the precision of a well-aimed arrow that pierced the celebratory atmosphere. plunging the auditorium into a profound silence broken only by scattered gasps and the rustle of shifting bodies as parents exchanged wide-eyed glances, blending admiration with speculation about the underlying family dynamics now laid bare in this public forum. A wry smile tugged at my lips as I elaborated just enough to savor the irony without overplaying my hand, adding that after dropping out 5 years earlier amid personal and financial pressures, I had bootstrapped a tech company specializing in AI solutions for underserved businesses, a journey that proved the value of grit over grades and funding innovations that institutions like this one desperately needed, eliciting tentative chuckles from sections of the crowd who appreciated the understated humor and impending expectations, while the dean stammered confirmations that verified my claim, shifting the applause from Lisa's solo spotlight to a shared acknowledgement that underscored the twist of fate in my unheralded return. In the ensuing backstage whirlwind that followed the formalities, where confetti still dusted the air and flashes from cameras captured the chaos, Mom and Dad materialized from the crowd like apparitions from a half-forgotten dream. Dad's face a mask of flustered remorse as he gripped my arm with a grip that trembled slightly, sputtering fragmented apologies about the harshness of their initial reaction and how pride had blinded them to my potential during those intervening years, while Mom's eyes brimmed with unshed tears as she pulled me into an embrace that felt both genuine and overdue, murmuring pleas for reconciliation framed around the family's recent strains, including Dad's undisclosed health scares that had prompted her earlier call. A vulnerability that humanized their past judgments yet complicated my resolve to hold firm against the manipulations that had shaped our rift. Lisa approached last, her gown disheveled and composure cracked as she confronted me in a side alcove. Away from prying eyes, admitting in a voice thick with emotion that she had indeed amplified the disgrace label in conversations with our parents and even university contacts to carve out her own space unshadowed by my choices. A confession that revealed her internship and accolades as partly built on that selective erasure, the twist hitting me with a rush of vindication mingled with sorrow for the sibling rivalry that had festered unchecked, allowing my revenge to unfold not through venomous barbs, but a clever orchestration of presence and provision that forced accountability without descending into the pettiness they might have expected. The satisfaction washed over me as the gathered faculty and donors toasted my contributions, dubbing me the youngest major investor in the university's storied history, amid handshakes that conveyed respect earned through action. Yet the emotional undercurrents left room for discord, with the audience perhaps disagreeing with the measured coolness of my delivery that prioritized poetic justice over immediate warmth, viewing it as a barrier to healing rather than a necessary assertion of self-worth in the face of betrayal. As the family exchanged tentative hugs amid promises of future dialogues that hung fragile in the air, I stepped out into the fading afternoon light with the weight of victory tempered by lingering ambiguities about whether forgiveness could truly mend the fractures, or if the silence I had wielded so effectively would persist as the ultimate boundary. Pondering in the quiet aftermath if true closure demanded vulnerability I was not yet ready to extend, or if walking away intact represented the profoundest form of resolution in a narrative far from neatly concluded.